Powered by the Montana Television Network. This is the 5:30 News on Q2, Montana's news leader.
Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Jay Cohn.
And I'm Jeanelle Slade. 2 people are dead after a head-on crash this morning near Fromberg. One of them a Joliet High School student.
The community and schools in the community reeling tonight as word of this accident spreads. A 16-year-old Fromberg boy and a 56-year-old man from Billings both died at the scene.
And the boy's 12-year-old sister was also injured. She's being treated for broken bones but is expected to be okay. And the crash happened around 7:45 this morning on Highway 310 just north of Fromberg. Montana Highway Patrol says a Dodge Ram driven by the 16-year-old Joliet student was headed north when it crossed over into the southbound lane for unknown reasons and collided head-on with the Ford pickup.
The driver of the Ford was a 56-year-old Billings man. He was not wearing his seatbelt at the time of the crash. MHP says both teenagers, though, were wearing their seatbelts. And we do know, according to the Jayhawks football Facebook page, the 16-year-old was a member of the football team. Authorities have not yet released the names of anyone involved in this crash.
New details surrounding a crash that killed a Montana Department of Transportation worker south of Billings yesterday.
Police Lieutenant Brandon Woolley says the cause of the crash remains under investigation, but he is able now to provide a few more details on how the accident happened. Woolley says the flatbed truck driven by a 28-year-old man was headed east on I-90 at the South Billings Boulevard off-ramp. That's when the truck left the traffic lanes, crossed into the construction zone, and collided with 3 separate unoccupied work vehicles, in the process killing the construction worker.
Woolley says he won't know if the incident warrants charges until their investigation is complete. He tells us that OSHA will conduct a separate investigation into whether or not the proper safety protocols were in place. The Montana Department of Transportation will also conduct its own investigation.
And still at this hour, the name of the victim has not been made public.
Have you been given a prepaid debit card after a recent hospital visit here in Billings? If so, you might be part of a class action lawsuit filed last week in Yellowstone County District Court. A Billings woman is suing the parent company of St. Vincent Healthcare, SCL Health, after the hospital overcharged her for a medical visit and then gave her a prepaid debit card in response. The suit is filed individually on behalf of Billings resident Cheryl Bratton, but her legal team is asking who else is impacted. Back in June, Bratton was overcharged $12 after a recent visit to St. V's. Her lawyer, John Heenan, says a third of people never activate those cards, and there are fees to withdraw cash. We reached out to St. Vincent Healthcare in a statement from the hospital president, Steve Lovelace. He says he cannot comment on the suit at this time, but they are taking the claim very seriously.
If passed, Initiative 185 would extend Montana's Medicaid expansion program, a program that provides health coverage to nearly 100,000 low-income adults. The latest polling on this initiative, though, indicates its passage is no sure thing. Our chief political reporter Mike Dennison tonight has more on what happens to Medicaid expansion if this initiative fails, or for that matter, if it passes.
In 2015, a coalition of Democrats and moderate Republicans in the legislature narrowly approved Montana's Medicaid expansion program. But now, most Republicans who were part of that coalition are opposing Initiative 185, which would extend the program past 2019.
My philosophy remains unchanged. I actually think expansion is our moral duty, right? And the problem I have is that 185 doesn't provide the boundaries that I'd like to see on the next generation of expansion.
Republican lawmakers who favored the expansion 3 years ago also insisted on a 2019 expiration date so they could review the program and perhaps make some changes. But core supporters of Medicaid expansion aren't confident that same coalition will exist at the 2019 legislature, so they came up with I-185 asking the voters to extend the program. I-185, however, also raises tobacco taxes to help pay the state cost of Medicaid expansion, and 2 tobacco firms are spending more than $17 million to defeat the measure. GOP supporters of the expansion say if I-185 loses, they'd still argue to extend the program, but make it more restrictive and require hospitals benefiting from the program to help cover the cost. Republican former state Senator Bruce Tutvet of Kalispell voted for Medicaid expansion in 2015, but has appeared on campaign literature opposing I-185.
I would come down and testify for voting for it again with these caveats that there's skin in the game, there's co-pays, there's work requirements, the things that make it a functioning, good program.
Supporters of Medicaid expansion say they're happy to work with the next legislature on tweaking the program, whether the initiative passes or not. But they remain concerned that if I-185 fails, all of Medicaid expansion could be in jeopardy.
What we're not willing to do is fundamentally gut the program, which is what many in the legislature want to do. As we go into the legislative session, we have the extremes in both parties, and we need folks in the middle to get this done. And that middle is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, where we don't have the votes.
So I think we can say no matter what happens with I-185, the fate of Medicaid expansion will still be decided next year in this building behind me. At the Capitol, Mike Dennison, MTN News.
Thank you, Mike. If Medicaid expansion does continue, the state will be responsible for 10% of its approximate annual cost of $600 million.
Today, Senator Jon Tester checking off the boxes on his ballot in Fort Benton.
Now keep in mind, in our MTN MSU poll out just this week, Tester is holding a 3-point lead over his Republican challenger Matt Rosendale. Senator Tester is seeking a third term in the Senate. Libertarian
Rick Breckenridge is also running in this year's Senate contest.
Well, with the 10th anniversary of the Pacific Northwest Trail now just months away, we can expect to see more attention on this 1,200-mile hike between Glacier Park and the Olympic Coast.
MTN's Dennis Bragg has more tonight on the debate over the rerouting the trail in an effort to protect grizzlies in northwest Montana.
The PNT isn't a new idea, first proposed during the long-distance backpacking boom of the 1970s. Stretching from the Continental Divide peaks of Glacier National Park, the route crosses multiple ranges, including the Cascades and Olympics, before terminating at Cape Alava in Olympic National Park. But the PNT's route west of Lake Koocanusa is in dispute. Members of the Yak Forestry Council want to see it rerouted to the south, following the Fisher River, instead of hugging the border through grizzly country and the Yak to prevent conflicts.
The Yak is very low elevation, very limited in alpine habitat that grizzlies use late in the summer when hikers are using them. Maybe 3% of the valley is that upper alpine above tree line, and it's just not a good idea to be putting hikers in those last, I think, 3 to 4 breeding age females with young up there now. That's all we've got. And you get down to that number, you just can't afford to lose one.
Bass and his supporters say it's an issue of safety for bear and backpacker alike. Not everyone feels that way. The Pacific Northwest Trail Association defends the original route. The Forest Service says it could cost millions to move. Even biologists question the true impact on grizzlies, with a few dozen hikers tackling the route annually. But some locals feel access to services for long-distance hikers tips the scales in favor of the southern alternative.
Backers of the alternative trail route say it would give hikers the option of getting off the trail to resupply in places like Libby and here in Troy, helping the local economy.
What we see happening normally with tourism traffic going through Troy is they go through Troy very quickly and head on to Glacier Park, and it would be nice for people to be able to come through in a slower way and interact more with locals and see in a little more detail the beauty we have right around here.
Where the trail was going through, it's not many hop-off spots to where they can go and get supplies, and that could be, it can be dangerous if somebody has an injury and they need to come in and get somebody quickly.
Advocates of the Southern Alternative believe the reroute would also give hikers many more options, including access into the scenic Cabinet Mountains wilderness, providing the diversity through hikers are looking for.
Absolutely. Yeah, you imagine these guys are going 1,300 miles. They're going to be starting in Glacier. They're going to end at the Pacific Coast. The Kootenai Valley is something they will remember and most likely will bring them back. It's that different taste than what everything else has to offer.
Change won't be easy. Beyond the debate, Congress must be ultimately convinced. On special assignment in Troy, Dennis Bragg, MTN News.
Thanks, Dennis. Beautiful shots there, huh? Bass, by the way, says his group plans to stay in touch with Montana's congressional delegation about these proposed changes to the Pacific Trail route.
Coming up on tonight's 5:30 News, these electrical boxes are giving this young artist the spark she needs. We will show off her work.
And later in sports, Scott Breen shows us which Billings teams will face off against each other tomorrow in the state soccer semifinals.
And coming up in weather, a couple of Clipper-type systems are moving through the state. They could be kicking up the winds tonight right on through Saturday. Winds getting maybe up to 50 miles per hour. We'll tell you all about it in a few more minutes.
You're watching MTN News with Jay Cohn and Jeanelle Slade. Storm Tracker weather with Bob McGuire. And sports with Scott Breen. This is the 5:30 News on Q2, Montana's news leader.